What's up tout le monde? C'est le Brazz. C'est le moment de faire ça. Boom. Donc, yep. Aujourd'hui, ça va être quand même une possible journée. On va commencer la campagne de Space Marine de Warhammer 40k. It's gonna be super cool because I've played that game, but not a lot, and I don't really remember the story, so it's gonna be like a first experience. And I've been listening a shit ton of book from Warhammer. It's super cool. It helps me a lot to have great idea to write stuff. So I'm at I bought the first book of Halo, and from the Horus Rising Heresy, I'm almost finished the fourth book. Alright, so let's skip this shit. I want to hear. This was yesterday, so I'm really happy to catch it up like a day later, because or else it would have been erased, I think, from the Twitch account of the PressCorps. I'm from the future.
It's a live, community-based call-in show, fielding your thoughts on and tales from the Foxhole War. So join the Discord right now through the link below. Sign in through the call queue text channel.
I'm over there too.
And hop in the voice lounge for a chance to share your story. Tonight's developer guest, lead developer Mark Foot.
The man, the legend, the myth.
Winner of the Jeffrey Jennings Award for Excellence in Journalism, Jeffrey Jennings.
Yo, I feel like it's a real true show.
All right, welcome.
Woo!
Another episode of Zero Dark PressCorps. Just as the man said, we are back with our developer guest this time. And people are chomping at the bit to get their questions on the line. Mark, how are you?
I'm good, and if I lose my voice today, we'll have to end it early. I had a very meeting-filled day. I've been basically talking for the last 9 hours.
So. You are in charge. You are a lead developer for Clapfoot, but you probably should just get someone. You should delegate that role to someone else and just have them do all the talking for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, usually I don't spend my whole day talking. It's usually just maybe like an hour or two. But it just so happens that it landed on this day. We're also doing like interviews and stuff, as you know. We're trying to grow the team, so it's been a whole
Nice. They're trying to grow the team. That's good.
Land on the same day.
Really happy about
this podcast, which
about
is great,
this.
but it's just like, yeah. Hopefully, I think I'll be fine, but it's just my voice might start to go halfway through. So
I appreciate it, and we'll see how it goes tonight. We'll see how far we can get. We apologize for your vocal cords in advance. For those who don't know, this show, as explained in the intro, is a call-in show. Although we've already got a filled call list, plenty of people who are chomping at the bit to really engage here with the Foxhole community and the developers. But I always like to start off with some of the more pressing questions, with some opening questions. So, with the looming release of Foxhole version 1.0, we are in that mode of the game, seeing another record-breaking population explosion. Are multiple shards the new normal?
I'm gonna let them talk about.
So yeah, I mean, for the last month or so, it has gone from being this thing in the further future to a reality. And I think right now, we will, based on the current trajectory, we probably will likely merge back into a single shard. At some point, we're not rushing it. Actually, it's kind of funny because there's a lot of people. We actually got a lot of feedback from people on the second shard, and they didn't. They actually didn't want us to shut it down, right?
No. We don't want.
Kind of liked what
Yep.
was going on there, and I think they were concerned that if we had shut it down too soon, the world wouldn't be able to fit everyone in it. So yeah, I think right now multiple shards is a reality, and I think, you know, we will go back to one before the next big update. But you know, after that,
Please
who knows,
keep
right?
to.
It's really hard to say. But I think the one good thing is that this kind of forced our hand to add in better support for this type of scenario if it happens in the future. You know, we obviously have plans to like, you know, I don't think it's a big secret that we're also going to be working on like expanding the world and things like that. Like, we haven't officially announced anything, but you know, it'd be weird. I don't think it's like a big or anything like that, right? It's not like surprise reveal. We're, you know, going to be making the world larger. So yeah,
They have to at some point,
yeah,
for sure.
so like it is. I think for now it's a temporary situation, but then I think this could resurface at any point in the future, right? So it's kind of like we're more ready for it now, right? It was a rough, so just to make it, we weren't expecting for it to happen this soon, so we kind of had to scramble to make sure certain things were working well with multiple shards, and the experience isn't ideal, but we've been working on making that work better. And it's not necessarily for like now, it's more for like, you know, at certain points in the future, this is probably going to happen, right? So
it's not desired, but it is necessary.
yeah, exactly. I think, you know, if we're talking exploratory, like if we were to do like Foxhole 2 ever, which there's no plan to do that, right? But just as like as exploratory
Why?
thought, like if you want to make this game, you know, kind of scale infinitely, you'd have to start very differently. Like, you really need to have a different tech first of all, and sort of like some other way to make space, right? Some other way to make maps. You can't do it the way we're doing it right now is a very handcrafted type of map design, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just wouldn't, you know, you'd have to make like 500 maps, right? This way, which is not scalable, but you'd have to find like a new way to do it, right?
I mean, maybe not 500 maps, but are there any plans to create brand new regions or even new groups of regions, like maybe say 6 or a dozen in a second shard, you know, that don't copy the original full world conquest that we know, but maybe something different, maybe an opportunity there to introduce new terrains and climates?
Yeah, I think one way. So like I said, I think I mentioned this on a previous show, but you know, multiple shards are reality, but it's always our goal to make people feel like what they're inside is a unique thing, right? Is a unique world. So there's different ways you can do it. Like you can do it by saying, hey, we're just going to brute force and make the world large enough. You know, there's obviously a lot of problems associated with that. Another way you can do it, the next like step in that's a bit easier, is doing something like, hey, you have like a whole nother front, right? Like this, you know, kind of, if you're to compare it to the real World War II, you would have like the Pacific Front, right? Um, and then that'd just be a whole nother theater of war, right? So like that's another way you can do it. And you know, there's pros to that too, because it's like you can say, hey, I'm kind of like, you know, Warren, like I'm kind of burnt out on this shard. I'm gonna go to the other one. I'm gonna play there for a while, right? So,
Mr. Sanchip Mr. Sanchip says that every time. Shout out to my man. We need to make a track someday together.
Like, this seems like a weird thing now, like this scaling thing, but it's not. Like, we've always had this issue, right? Beginning, it was like one server, and there was
shout out to
like, at most
I Saw a Bear.
people playing it every week.
Right.
And it's like, well, what are you gonna do when it gets past 100, right? And it's like, here we are, like 4 years later, and then there's like thousands of people playing it. And it's
has the game reached? Yeah, has the game reached the technical player limit to what a single region can hold, or is there still room to squeeze stuff out of that, or has the engine, have the servers reached their limit?
No, I don't think it's reached its limit. And in fact, we made great. So one of like we've talked about it here and there, but a lot of it is kind of in the background. Like just about a year ago, we were only able to support like 150 to maybe like 175 or so players. But now like we've been cranking it up to 250, and often it's fine, right? Because of all the optimizations, we put in a lot of This is the thing that like frustrates me sometimes because I hear comments like, "Oh, all you guys do is work on like content instead of making the game like better." Right? It's like I don't think you understand that like the amount of time we put into optimization, like literally, we're sitting there putting weeks and months into benchmarking tools, into like all these things just to squeeze out like another 20, 30 player slots, right? And like right now,
Also, it's hard to notice, right? Because at any
it's
given
hard to notice,
point,
but this is very hard. Like making a
Yeah, I
tank,
thought it was 200
right?
too.
Relatively speaking, is like easy, right? But people think that like we put out a tank, they think, oh my god, you spent 2 months on this tank. It's like no, no, we spent like 2 months on optimization, and the tank was just different people working on that, right? Like it like the content art people were mostly working on that, and then the programmers were working on the other stuff, like on fixing bugs, on like optimization. But to get back to the optimization point, we were able to like push the envelope up to 250. It varies because like as the war goes on, there's more things that are built in the world, and we have to scale it down a bit. But like we are able to, at the start of a war, the very start of a war, when you have that like first rush, we can go up to like 260, 270 now, and it's like, and it's fine, right? And we've over the last like month or two, when we had that player surge, we were looking for any option. Like we basically reached out to many different types of like server hosts, because our current server hosts, we were always buying the best. Like people are always like, oh, why don't you pay for like better servers, right? Again, we're using like the best thing that is possible, right, with our server host. So we start looking, okay, has any new hardware become available since we last looked at this? Like I'm talking literally like what is like Intel working on right now? Like what did they just release, right? In the last like 3 months or something like that. And then we're like, okay, well let's rent that hardware, but that hardware is scarce. We can't get a lot of it, but let's try this. And we tried a bunch of different hardware. We were able to squeeze out a bit more performance, and both the combination of the optimizations and the hardware, we're able to get up to like 250 at the start of war. And then eventually, it has to come down a bit to like maybe like 220, 230. But this is a far cry from like even like a year ago. And I think you can go further, right? But again, this is like time and effort. I don't know if we have time to necessarily optimize more in the next couple of months, but we're gonna keep working on it, right? And there's other crazier things you can try out as well that we haven't done. So yeah.
Well, I think we just have a little bit more daylight for some crazy before 1.0. So we will have to see. Last question. You might have mentioned it, and I think I missed it. But can you give us a number on what each region can hold in terms of a player number, total player number?
Yeah. So that's like the number. Like basically 250.
250 is the number. Okay.
So
as
like,
of now. And that's it fluctuates probably based on performance or maybe things going on.
It's like a dynamic thing. So I think that
so Deadlands.
So at the beginning of the war, there are 250,
through that region all
and
the time.
as things get built,
yeah, exactly. It's different factors. So I would say like 220 to 250, right? So like depending as a war goes on, and if a region is really busy and people are building like lots of things in it, then it tends to be on the lower end, right? If there's a huge battle, it tends to be on like the lower end. So it's like a variety of things, right? The worst case is when everyone is in the same place. Yeah. So yeah.
Funny enough, the one that when it needs the most room, it can't quite handle it. I guess the limit really is 225 then. if it lowers based on the amount of people that are there versus, well, you can fit 250 on the back line. Not that there'll ever be 250. Well, I take that back. Maybe no. What during the French-speaking player explosion, there were a lot of people in those back lines, which is awesome, by the way. Thank you to the French. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark. What were you saying?
C'était
Yeah, no,
très
like
cool.
it's actually based more on like what I meant by that is if there's if the Deadlands has a lot of players, but they're kind of split up into 2 or 3 major like fronts in Deadlands, then it tends not to put so much strain. It's like the most amount of strain on the server is when everyone is in like literally the same place, right?
So when everyone's dogpiling on abandoned ward, that puts more strain on it than if there were 3 separate battles of 250 total players taking place in Callahan's Boot, abandoned ward, Liberation Point, maybe up in the north for whatever reason, or then Salt.
That's exactly it. When it's more like dense, right? Like the density.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, flanking not only is a smart tactical decision, it also helps server performance. So please, I've been saying this for years. Find the flank. Gosh darn it, I've been saying it for years. But in any case, let's move on to our esteemed callers here tonight who are, as I always say, chomping at the bit. The 128th Liquid Popsicle. Welcome back
Liquid
to Zero
Popsicle.
Dark PressCorps. What do you have for us here?
Well, I wouldn't be bringing this up if I didn't think it was a serious issue.
Of
I
course.
hate to start this, but at the moment, and I've been giving it the benefit of the doubt for a very long time. I've used both factions' artillery because I've taken the opportunity of Shard 2 to play on the colonial side. Don't tell any other wardens that; they don't need to know. But at the moment, there's a serious balance issue between the light arty. The heavy arty is completely fine. In fact, dare I say, perfect. At 300 meters, the range difference of 50 meters makes almost no difference because the artillery is spaced so far apart. It's not something that generally comes into play. The issue with the light artillery is that it has a the field artillery specifically has a significant advantage in counter artillery, which no other artillery in the game has. That is that it is not only mobile, it can move after it takes damage, it counts as a vehicle, so it takes reduced damage from artillery, and it's invisible. And I say it's invisible. I understand that it's not invisible, but the issue is it relies on the same line of sight field system that the field weapons do.
So it's effectively invisible.
It is effectively invisible because it is usually so far behind the back line that at least something is obscuring it, right? And what that means is that sure, you can find them when they fire, but since your guns are always visible, they always know where you are. They do significantly more damage when they hit you, and if I'm not mistaken, the field artillery is more accurate than the Warden 120 or 130 millimeter is. This is 120, 120. Which it all adds together into this huge issue of, well, they roll up. I have footage of this, and I'd be happy to send it to you, but we had a full battery setup with shell rooms and 6 guns, and those guns were fully crewed, and we lost to a single FA. That should not happen. And the problem there is the FA could fire at us, do significant damage because structures and of course the artillery pieces that we have are affected by no man's land, and then when we fire back at them, they move, and then we don't know where they are, so they get a free opportunity to shoot at us again. And I've said this again and again. The only issue with this, I'm completely fine with their artillery taking more effort to destroy. It doesn't bother me, especially since it can be stolen, yada yada. I don't mind that. What bothers me is the fact that we can't see them, so we can't even remotely counter them, right? And personally, I would really like to see the light artillery, the amount of damage that they do to each other be lined up a little bit more, because it's a bit ridiculous that we have to land 9 or 10 direct hits on them when they only have to land 2. And having dumped well over 400 shells over the course of 30 minutes into an FA that wasn't even crewed or being repaired, and it took 30 minutes to kill it with 150s.
I'm about to get high as fuck, Mr. Sunship! Damn! My man!
Yeah, so, just to separate out a couple of those issues. I think so, unless there's some factor that is there that that we're missing. The accuracy should be the same when the distance is the same, right? So I don't think there isn't any intentional, unless there's some unintentional physics issue that we have to take a look at. The accuracy shouldn't be different.
Do you
That's what I'm
believe the
saying,
wind?
unless I'm
the wind
mistaken.
factor was the same
Because
in both?
It could have
tests?
been just they were extremely lucky with their hits,
Uh-huh.
but it definitely felt like it was more accurate than ours.
Yeah. So in terms of the other, I guess in terms of the other things, what would be the what changes would you want to say? You know, if you were like game designer on this right now, and you want to be like, okay, I want to rein it in, and you want to make it to what you perceive to be balanced. Is it mainly addressing like the visibility issue? Is that like
Honestly, I think the visibility issue may be just the primary issue in it. Of course, I don't like the damage issue. I don't think it makes that much of a difference, since you know, that's a huge advantage of it being, you know, a vehicle, is that it can take the damage and keep moving. That doesn't bother me too much. What bothers me is the fact that they always know where we are and we don't know where they are when they can move and we can't. If that was reversed, if we were the ones that were invisible and they were the ones that could always be seen, I feel like that would be a lot more fair for everyone, because they can move when they get shot at, and of course, you know, you'll be able to see them, but they'll be able to evacuate. Meanwhile, us, we can't move with our emplacements, and this goes for colonial emplacements too, of course. The emplacements won't be able to move, but after they fire, after you figure out where they are, it's not like they can go anywhere, right? So it gives them a little bit of an advantage on, you know, making those first shots makes the field artillery have a little bit more difficult of a time to engage with them, but at the same time, it doesn't give them an overwhelming advantage like it does on the field artillery, where they can just disappear and reappear someone else 5 minutes later.
So is the counter artillery a problem because they're hitting your players, or because they're hitting your artillery?
It's more of an issue just that we can't fire back, if that makes sense. You know, we'll get shot at, and then of course, you know, it makes sense. We get hit. Oh, there goes a few crew members. The guns, they take damage. Of course, when the emplacements.
I think it'd be pretty hard to actually take out an in-place artillery with light artillery. Like like the amount of damage it would do, you would need a lot. But I can see it.
So here's the issue with that, and I understand the whole put it in a trench. Putting it in a trench does make a difference. It's still not enough to offset the fact that it's stationary and now takes up 4 times the area. And putting it in a trench isn't always an option, especially since there are usually a lot of obstacles like trees or trench husks from connector trenches that don't get blown up, or uneven terrain. That's something that the field artillery doesn't have to worry about, and it has health comparable to an emplacement that's in a trench, right? But it takes up probably about a quarter of the size and is mobile.
Okay, so like here's the exploratory thought. What if you can
we'll have this be the last, because you gotta start wrapping it up. But yeah, go for it.
What if you can put a camo netting over your in-place artillery, which
that was okay. I was gonna bring this up. We were talking the other night. It's literally, what if we could put a camo net over our emplacement, right? And then the emplacement's invisible. And I would love for that to be across all emplacements, even all field weapons, right?
Yeah.
Because it would be so cool to have, you know, you have your FAT that's sitting in the middle of the field, right? And you know, it's not like, you know, being in a bush, but you get that little bit of visibility gap with the camo net on. I just think that'd be so neat.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think that has to happen at some point. Like we've talked about it so much as a team. Like can't even name how many times. So I think I think that would be a natural solution to this problem in the future, right? Yeah, it's cool.
Insert Command and Conquer General's camo netting meme here. But
30-second begging from the artillery clan leader, tier 2
seconds.
shell rooms or shell piles, please. I beg you. We need it. I don't care if the shell room has, like a tier 2 shell room has half the capacity. Please.
Fair enough.
Don't want to be slave to concrete.
The 128th Liquid Popsicle, an artillery-based regiment, working here with us again. Thank you so much, Liquid, for your input.
Have a nice night.
Thanks.
All right. Coming up next, and actually, while I get things started here, I did forget to mention this at the beginning of the call section, which is that we do have a 7-minute soft limit, so I won't hard cut you off, but I'll just say, hey, maybe we'll start wrapping it up. And additionally, we do have a lot of members of the same regiment calling in, which is perfectly fine, no problem with that whatsoever. But if it is a back-to-back call from the same regiment, we will insert someone in between. Just to break things up a little bit, because it might get some of that hive mind going. Not that there's too much of that going around necessarily, but just to kind of make things a little bit more equitable for everyone here. But anyways, coming up next we have Lek and Maybar joining in on the car. Maybar from the 82DK. How are you, gentlemen?
Fine.
Hello, good day.
Great. What do you have for us?
Tech Talk. I already made a Reddit post. I'm not sure if Mark's seen it. I could link him to it after the fact, or after the call, or after the stream, or whatever.
Is this one of your comics? Like your
No. It's not an update comic.
Okay.
It's specifically about tech, right? I didn't. Admittedly, this was it. What's funny is I actually started. It started out as something I wanted to write to ask him tonight, but it just kind of spiraled into I'm making this a full Reddit post because I think I had enough ideas at the time to make a whole thing out of it. But
go for it.
To summarize the main points, the current tech system limits player options. It limits the dev's abilities to make meaningful balancing decisions because you get limited testing with because of the fact that both teams almost always never have what their full tech is available to them, because you just can't get it because you're locked out of a choice when you make it. Maybar linked me to a previous stream where you had talked about these issues yourself, so I won't go too heavy on them. But I had a specific suggestion in mind for how to solve the issues that the current tech system faces, namely a change from tech being tied to raw resource collection with iron and aluminum, and instead changing it to be a production side of things where anyone can contribute to tech by producing anything in a tier. There would be no more so to preface this, here is the sort of thing. There would be no more auto unlocks. Iron and aluminum would not be used, or would be used in a separate way than it is currently. And anyone can contribute to teching vehicles just by making a prototype of its current thing. However, this would also involve changing the way prototypes work. Now, to get into it, so here's a example that I want to say. So let's say you're on the infantry tree. First tier is SMGs in the auto tech with med kits or whatever, and then revolvers and shotguns, right? That's how it usually is, but you've changed med kits and all that and medical to be an auto start of war thing, and SMGs are an auto thing, right? The change that I'm proposing is to make all three of them able to be made at any time. No matter what, if you have the ability to produce tier 1, you're able to produce anything in it at any time. However, it would be a prototyped version of that weapon, and thus the penalty for weapons, because prototype weapons don't actually work the same way as prototypes at the moment, the difference would instead be that you would get less per crate. So your original premise for prototypes was that they would be more they would be incomplete, not ready for mass production. The idea here would be that if the team contributes towards producing one specific vehicle, item, or etc., they would be able to then mass produce it because you would not get a penalty. For vehicles, the change to prototypes would be removing the 3 times cost. They would cost the same as the normal thing. They would be repairable. And they could then, once you unlock the proper thing, you could then upgrade it for a cost relative to whatever. And from there, what you'd see is anyone can
I don't
produce these
know.
prototypes. The only downside
I
of
really
it being a
prefer
prototype
the
for vehicles would be
automatic,
it's
and
like
we
weaker
get
stats
everything.
across the board, right?
Really everything.
And I believe that if you combine like and then
We
as
should
far
not
as
be
like
locked
unlocking stuff, you
from
could produce
basically
anything that you've
choosing a
already
vehicle.
got the tier
Yeah, it
like
will make the
above
war
you,
different
so
every
you
time,
would
but
never
people
be
will
locked out of
always stick
weapons
with the same
just because you
choice, or
finished
else they
that
will
tier.
lose the war.
But you could only produce stuff up to 1 tier ahead of you for prototypes. That is the that was a lot of words. I hope you understood most of it. That's the basic like idea of the premise, though.
So tiered, right? Is that what I got from it?
I don't know what you mean by tiered, but
no. Okay, sorry. Then I must have misheard. You know what? I want to know Maybar's thoughts on this first before going to Mark potentially.
So basically, Lex's idea here is to separate the weapons. So basically, there's going to be some sort of weapons in the first tier. That's going to be like SMG, revolver, pistol, and whatnot.
Right.
Initially, you're able to take these, but you can only get half of the crate size from these. If you, let's say, produce 50 of these, you can get you unlock the full potential of it, so you get full crate, and then you unlock the next tier as well. To move on to the third tier, you would need to take at least 3 out of 4 items in the first tier, and at least 1 in the second tier, and then you can go on to the third tier, and same like that. For vehicles, what I was thinking is we can start off with production of prototypes. So basically, initially, the vehicle you're building is going to be a prototype. And when you produce, let's say, 100 of those, then that vehicle becomes a regular, normal vehicle. And if you want to upgrade it to make it like tier 1 or tier 2, you use the iron to upgrade it to tier 1. And if you produce enough upgrades, upgraded vehicles, then that thing becomes the regular vehicle you produce without the extra iron cost. That was the idea.
So just so I can wrap my head around it, you're saying that for the vehicles, at any point, as long as that row is unlocked, you can always make a prototype. But if there's just in that produced, it will move from being a prototype to a tier 1. And then if you keep producing tier 1, that eventually gets to become tier 2, and so on and so forth.
No, so long as you produce tier 1s, it would be tier 1s. What Maybar's incorporation into this idea is essentially that if you use iron, you can produce an up-tiered version of that thing. Like it would just be your regular version, like that if you just go to a factory, it would still be the tier 1, but if you throw in iron and aluminum, you could make like a vet kit instead of a prototype kit, and then you could then use that at like a garage or vehicle factory or like an MPF in order to make an up-vetted version of that vehicle. And then once you produce enough of those, that's when anyone that wants to produce it, no matter what, it would be that up-tiered version without the iron cost.
Okay, cool. So I guess like what is the main problem this is solving is that to allow players to make anything they want. Obviously, it's not anything they want, whatever they want, because they'd have to go through this process. But is ultimately like, okay, give players an option to sort of like.
So no lockout, no lockout.
Yeah, no lockout.
So
penalties, but no lockout.
Right. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
No, okay. So I think I get that part. And I guess what is the like? Is it still expected that the configuration of the tech tree changes?
Yes.
Or is it so like? I guess what's the expected outcome? So if you were to run like let's say like you were to run like 5 wars in a row, right, without introducing any new content into the game, what sort of like?
What differentiates each war? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's part of the thing that I wanted this system to like handle, is making each war, like making there not a distinct like optimal way to play it, because maybe there eventually would be once you discover it, but the idea would be that in certain wars you can either try your fastest by taking the optimally like fast way to try and get to a specific like power tech, or sometimes you might want to spend like a war trying to fill out the earlier tiers to unlock a more varied thing, putting your iron and aluminum into upvetting an earlier version of a vehicle to try and like make power plays in the early game. So something that we didn't say was an idea that was come up with by the crowd up in the lounge was that what you could use iron or aluminum to produce a prototype and contribute to the tech still, like a tier above what you're currently able to like produce, instead of like that way you could get prototypes earlier and start contributing to tech earlier than you're normally able to just by producing, and that would allow you to then God.
So basically what this does is it fixes two problems within the community. The one thing is iron and aluminum grind is too boring for most people. They don't like doing that. So this just takes the iron and aluminum. It makes them an optional thing to upgrade your weapons or make prototype kits and whatnot. It still increases the tech, but it's not very necessary. So it's optional totally.
Yeah.
And one other thing is that well, I kind of forgot, so like go ahead.
Oh no. I you might have noticed I also kind of lost my train of thought.
We'll start wrapping it up now, but yeah.
Actually, like, why don't you send me the thread after? It'd be interesting.
I think honestly, I think that actually might be what's best. So if we'll wrap it up.
The thread,
I
will say the thread is a little old. Like part of the ideas is that in the initial thread, prototypes were left unchanged from their current form. I went over it with a couple of people just like randomly in FOD, and there was a suggestion made by Shiv to change prototypes to be like repairable and not cost 3 times as much. That way, like people would be the only downside would be like the worse stats, right? So they'd be functionally identical to their normal counterpart, but they would be noticeably weaker as a way to sort of like stop the prototypes, that, as well as like some of the stuff that Maybar's inputted about like how it would work. Like you'd have to have 2 things from like the previous tier as well as 1 thing from that tier in order to unlock the next tier. Like stuff has changed from the initial suggestion post, but I will link you to it, and like if you have any questions, I will go over what's changed.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
These grand suggestions are always difficult to kind of discuss, particularly when you're tackling tech of all things. But yeah, definitely seeing it written down and seeing it laid out there.
There was one question that Mark had that I did want to answer that both me and Maybar kind of lost our train of thoughts on. What was that question you had asked, Mark?
What would you expect? I think you had.
Right.
But like, what would be the expected outcome if you were to run kind of like 5 wars in a row, right?
Yeah, the idea behind it is that you could still switch up the tech order, but like the way that it would also help you guys balance more is that if you noticed players routinely, like maybe one war they play it a lot more passively and they try to like get some options in the early game and they play just a kind of more moderate thing. Then if you take maybe one or two kit like an ISG or like some other power tech and you move it up a tier, you'll notice that the players then, instead of rounding out their tech tree, maybe they rush for that power tech, and then you could use that kind of data as like feedback for figuring out, okay, what technologies are a bit overtuned, what can we rein in, what do players typically like to go for as the meta. That way it would both allow you to make interesting choices with the tech tree, still play your little games, while also not as heavily impacting the balance of any one war because players could skip for stuff. But it would also give you the information about what is a bit overpowered, what's underpowered, because of like what players naturally choose, because player choice would be a lot more like relevant into what gets fully unlocked when, right?
It also doesn't block vehicles behind the tech tree or other vehicles. They just shadow it. If you want to use a vehicle, you can just maybe prototype it at least.
Yeah, that too. Like the other difference is that if some niche strategy evolves, because like in a really recent war, APCs plus Banes proved to be a pretty good niche anti-tank strategy. But the thing is that we hadn't teched APCs in 8 months on Colonial side, And the fact that we discovered this little strategy was something that people, like, because the Banes were added recently, and those little niche strategies aren't really tried out as much because most of the time you have no reason to tech APCs, but the fact that we could, under this proposed system, anyone could use it, you'd be a lot more able to discover these niche like options, and then maybe because someone noticed, wait, hey, APCs plus Banes is pretty good, maybe in the future you'd see people like put more attention onto unlocking APCs rather than it just being a niche strategy. Like it would allow stuff to evolve more naturally.
I think we'll have to wrap it up right there. But yeah, hey, Lek, Maybar, really appreciate you tackling this beast. Certainly, I think it'd be much better if we read this one out, but certainly talking about it would be interesting. So Lek, Maybar, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Good night.
All right, coming up next, we have Nayed 21 of the CSO, Colonial Special Operations, I believe. Nayed, what do you got for us? Actually, is this your first time on the show?
It is.
Yeah, well, hey, welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps.
Great. So I have 2 issues that I want to talk about, and I just want to know sort of what your opinion is, or if you have some sort of plans for solving these in the future. Number 1 is, during the last update war, War 71, the Logi towns were completely packed full of people, and I was wondering if you had some sort of I don't know, solution or idea for how to fix that. And I do have a suggestion if you want to hear that.
Yeah, actually, why don't you give your suggestion first before I...
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, an example I can have is Westgate has 2 refineries in it, but Longstone has all 3 factories in it. If you were to just move one of the factories up north, then you could at least reduce a bit of, how many people are in each town. Or then you have Great March, which has Soteria as the, has all the factories in it and refinery, but the town is like super compact. But then the rest of the region has all these towns that nobody ever goes to.
Yeah, it's a good point. No, I mean it's a good idea, right? I think the only tough thing is if the enemy gets a hold of those towns, they essentially have like a pretty strong anchor point that would be difficult to repel.
So snowballing might be an issue?
Yeah, I think you know what though, it's definitely a problem. So I guess if you want my thought on it, like especially in War 71, those areas were scaled way beyond what they were designed to support. So it's kind of like I'm 100% like with you on that. Like that's definitely a problem, and we do see like there's other scaling issues that we're seeing especially at the start of the war, like things like people lining up to, I don't know if you've seen the screenshots of like people lining up to make their truck. But I think that what we have to do is see where what would be a comfortable number to support in a shard, and then in the future we'd have to just make adjustments to like support that, whether it's making tweaks to the towns or like finding other ways, kind of like your suggestion, like snowballing or not, like it is an option, right? It's an option on the table, and I think we just have to like, basically what I'm trying to say is like, where it's at right now, it's not intended to like stretch that far. It was stretched further than it should have, and I think I think either ideas like yours or other ideas we'd have to implement to like, if it's a long-term problem, right, then yeah, 100%, right?
Yeah. Then I can go on to my the next issue about. So when I do Logi and when I build stuff at the beginning of the war, we just have a few items to build, and then as we unlock sledgehammers and then harvesters, it becomes an issue of I still have the exact same number of factories and factory slots to work with. So like especially when like Artie unlocks, like all the heavy weapon slots are just completely jam-packed full, or when bunker supplies unlock, then all the shirts are just completely all those factories are blocked. And then like as more and more like heavy equipment or like Logi has specific needs, the factories don't keep up with the scale of the war going on.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. What do you think about?
Yeah. So what I so this is gonna this might sound a bit bad, but I actually kind of feel that like that's kind of it's a problem. It's a good problem to have, because I feel like that opens up the doors to like new things, right? Like when there's too much logi, when logi is too like when there's a
too
bottleneck.
much logistics.
No.
Too many supplies. Too many people going back and forth.
When there's a bottleneck in a certain part of logistics, I guess this is not from a player point of view. From player standpoint, it's definitely would be frustrating because you just want to do more, right? I think from a design standpoint, it excites me a bit because it means there's an opportunity for us to add in something there, right? And what that something is, is a long conversation, but like it allows us to, just as like a brainstorm, like a complete brainstorm. This is not what we're doing. This is not planned, but just as a brainstorm, it's like, that would introduce an opportunity of like, okay, if making tons of shells is a huge bottleneck, right? And like in allowing there to be more production wouldn't harm the game, then there's a place there to say something like, what if players can find another way to make those shells, right? If they can do something else, they can make, I don't know, like a different production building or something. It's a cool space because now we have space for it. Where it's frustrating is when there's no space. When it's like, okay, well, we can't scale up, let's say, like something else that is already super like abundant, right? More abundant, and it'll be fun, right? When it's like there's when there's too much of something, it just becomes there's no point, right? So I think like this is a long answer, but
je suis en train de
I think what I would like to
écouter
see
une interview, puis après ça, je m'en
in
vais
an
partir
ideal
la campagne
world
de Space Marine
if
de
there
Warhammer.
are these bottlenecks, if we can find all the bottlenecks,
Le jeu Space Marine, carrément. Genre
maybe we
action,
can
genre
build,
full
we can
action.
add in new things into the game to allow players to overcome those bottlenecks, as long as it doesn't create a harmful effect to like the economy as a whole. And I think that like Lek
peut-être jouer avec ma manette, j'ai une manette toujours à
had been
côté de
harping
moi.
on this for a long time, like allow players to scale like their own logic, right? And it's like that's really good.
Ouais, ça se
if,
peut,
like,
tous les jeux
there is
d'anime
sort
avec
of
c'est le
this
même.
space for it, right?
Ils font chier!
Actually, my question to you, this is a question.
Yeah.
Like, besides artillery shells, are there other things that you feel like, man, I just wanna make more of this.
Ils ont
And
les
I
doigts
feel
tout
like
cassés
making
ou
more
quoi?
of this wouldn't harm the economy. Like, are there more things? Because that would be interesting to know about.
I mean, from
Nice.
what my group does, is usually just, I mean, like right now with the artillery update, that's what a lot of people want to do.
Nice.
I guess it's more of an issue of like, at a certain point in the war, things have a massive amount of demand, and like we have plenty of supplies,
Je vais te montrer. Je vais te montrer quelque chose. Je t'ai envoyé à toi, juste à toi. C'est personnel. Tu dois le garder. C'est rien de tes fesses. Il y a eu une coupe de dévoilement pour Capcom Resident Evil. C'est genre leur 25e anniversaire, genre. Fait que tout est en rabais en ce moment de Capcom, Steam puis partout, mais ils ont dévoilé plein de shit, man, pour le nouveau Resident Evil, puis ils ont dévoilé un Resident Evil VR. Ils refassent Resident Evil 4. Le 4, le gros, au complet en VR. L'inventaire a de l'air trop fucking hot quand tu check dans ton inventaire en VR. C'est carrément le genre, tu vois, Léon au début avec son pistol, genre contre le gars avec le fucking chainsaw, man, le sac à patate. Il était comme, oh shit, faut que tu te bounces. Ok, yeah, man. Là, extrêmement hot. Age of Empire 4 ont sorti des trailers.
Ouais, ça tu vois, là t'es dans ma...
C'est quoi l'autre jeu, je venais juste de dire avant? Je m'en souviens même plus. Ah ouais, Resident Evil. Non, Resident Evil, man, dans le fond, pour le nouveau, il sort le mois prochain, Resident Evil 8. Puis, Ça va être la première fois ever qu'on va avoir le mode mercenaire en first player. Et ça va être très hot parce que le nouveau il est en first player, genre. Il y a un mode mercenaire là, cette fois-ci. Et j'ai décidé mes races, man. Environ, qu'est-ce qu'ils vont avoir de l'air. Mes 8 races parfaites.
Ils sont pas parfaites, ça, c'est sûr que non.
C'est sûr. C'est prêt, Freddy.
Quoi?
Boom.
Ah ouais, t'es un fou de même, tu vas copier des autres jeux.
C'est sûr, man. Je vais pas copier, je vais m'inspirer. Yeah. Du côté gauche, c'est 8 races, man, de gros, carrément. Comme wow.
Tu me donnes le goût de jouer à StarCraft, on a ce trou de cul.
Non, man, faut qu'on se poigne, faut qu'on redownload Warhammer Dawn of War 2 pour la campagne together.
J'allais pas ce petit jeu-là. C'est le jeu en plus que tu peux faire des waves à la fin, là.
Ouais. Arrête, d'habitude il est en rabais à 2$. Comment ça, tu l'as pas déjà eu dans un gros pack, genre de quoi? Bizarre.
Non, j'ai jamais acheté ce jeu-là. Je checkais l'autre jour justement, parce que je checkais des reviews pis tout, là, pis c'est pas mal le meilleur qui est jamais sorti ever.
De Dawn of War, yeah, quand même. Celui-là pis Crusader. Moi, je suis en train de tout les refaire. Là. J'ai fini le premier Dawn of War. Parce que j'ai en train d'écouter les livres, bro. Yo, tu vas être fait. Ah, ouais, man, je suis rendu à mon 7e livre. Fucked up, là. Livre de 10-13 heures.
Nice.
Sauf que je les lis pas, je les écoute. J'en veux plus,
Qu'est-ce que
man.
tu devrais écouter? Ton prochain livre, qu'est-ce que ça devrait?
Quoi?
L'Odyssée.
Odyssey? L'Odyssey?
Ça, là, Jimmy, là, dans le fond, là, ça va. Premièrement, c'est du knowledge que tu as besoin là, dans la vie.
Uh-huh.
C'est l'Iliade et l'Odyssée de Homer. Comme Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
Tu sais quoi?
C'est quoi?
C'est toute l'histoire de la mythologie de la Grèce antique.
Ok.
Dans le fond, ça va t'apprendre comment c'est fait, mais c'est un philosophe qui l'a écrit.
Nice.
Sorry si je suis tous dans ton stream.
Je restais pas trop fort.
Mais ouais. C'est comme un. Le gars, il s'est servi de ces histoires-là pour inculquer au monde des leçons, puis aussi pour amener une morale, puis pour pas que les mêmes erreurs se reproduisent.
Ah, nice.
Ouais.
C'est pour ça qu'on écrit dans la vie.
Ouais.
Faut pas reproduire les mêmes erreurs. C'est pour ça qu'on écrit dans la vie.
Ça, c'est dans quelles années?
Dans quelles années?
La Grèce antique?
Non.
C'est 800 ans avant Jésus-Christ.
Yeah, before Christ. Yeah, 800 ans BC.
Ça, c'est pas dans ce temps-là que l'histoire se passe. C'est quand ça a été écrit.
Malade, hein, imagine. Ça a sûrement, genre, des chutes de même, ça a sûrement dû être, genre, été utilisé comme, genre, base pour faire plein de shit, genre, pis genre, plein de shit a été, genre, based upon, genre.
Mais toute la mythologie grecque, ça a été basé là-dessus, Jimmy.
Yeah. C'est sûr. Yeah, rip, man, je suis en train de checker, t'as même pas aucun Age of Empire, on les avait tous en CD dans le temps. Je checkais, t'as pas Age of Mythology non plus. This is crap, brother.
C'est carrément ça qu'ils disent. C'est lui qui les a écrits pour la première fois, puis sinon, c'était tout passé de façon orale.
Mais...
Puis si tu veux savoir, c'est qui les Minoans, puis les Mycénaans, dans le fond, c'est les Macédoyens, puis c'est les premières nations grecques. C'est pourquoi les Grecs étaient forts comme ça?
Pourquoi?
À cause de où est-ce qu'ils étaient situés sur la map, puis à cause de l'accès justement au cours d'eau qu'il y avait. Ça a fait qu'ils ont pu faire beaucoup d'échanges.
Logistique. Yeah.
Ouais, puis ils ont fait beaucoup de trade, puis beaucoup de politique, justement, puis ils sont devenus amis avec genre, les bonnes personnes.
C'est tout le temps eux autres que je pogne quand je joue à Total War. Total War Rome. Je pogne pas les Romains, je pogne les Grecs.
Son true form, mon chien.
C'est true. C'est très true.
Fait du bien fumer du vrai, oui.
True. Très vrai. Ça fait du... Ouais.
Tu reviens? Ne t'en vas pas?
Is it gonna launch something? Is it gonna launch something? Is it gonna connect me?
Man, faut que j'arrête de fumer la weed.
La weed, man. La weed et moi était tout autrefois.
T'as encore Valorant installé?
J'ai encore Valorant installé, ouais.
A space. Is it gonna... Non, pas depuis. 21. Le 21, il y a un bêta pour Resident Evil.
Est-ce que tu vas jouer?
Je peux même pas exit. Escapes à start game. That's great, Capcom. Really proud of you. Bien, ils ont montré aussi un nouveau trailer pour la série qui va sortir sur Netflix, de Resident Evil, anonyme. Il y a plein de shit, il reste fucking hot. So.
Moi, là, faut que j'arrête de jouer à Smite Big. Tu sais, je suis rendu au point où est-ce que je joue au jeu parce que c'est une addiction, puis parce que j'ai du fun, Big.
Juste parce que quand t'es à la maison, c'est ça qu'on fait, genre.
Ouais, mais là, faut que j'arrête. Faudrait que je le désinstalle, mes deux ordi, puis que je commence à faire d'autres choses. Pour de vrai.
Si tu pognes une autre addiction, tu veux-tu changer ton addiction pour une autre addiction ou tu veux genre vivre dehors pour l'été? L'été arrive, là, c'est sûr que genre l'été on abuse dehors, là.
Mais ça, je te dis, désinstaller de mes deux ordi, puis juste, genre, soit m'entraîner, lire des livres, genre, créer des univers, même, à la limite, là, genre, commencer à
Ben gros man, c'est sûr que en ce moment je suis en train de faire un projet que genre qui se représente pas. Là. En ce moment je peux pas trop le share là, parce que genre je suis en live stream. Mais je peux te send le website, il est rendu publié, man. Puis tu me dirais qu'est-ce que t'en penses, man. On peut en parler de même. Je peux show off de sur ma deuxième écran, c'est correct. Mais gros man, je pensais pas que genre. Man, je veux faire ça là, c'est sûr et certain là, c'est fucking hot. Je comprends même pas à quel point. Genre, yeah, man. Créer un univers. Et écrire là-dessus. Écrire des stories dans cet univers-là. En ce moment même, là, je suis en train de genre trouver les noms des races que je t'ai envoyées. Je suis en train de trouver le nom genre de la Horde puis l'Alliance. Parce qu'il y a deux factions, tu comprends? Il faut que je trouve de quoi qui est genre l'Alliance, genre. Puis de quoi qui est genre la Horde. Mais pas ces noms-là, là. Mais de quoi qui se crie bien, de quoi qui genre se rallie bien.
Comme
Exact.
Un enfant de moi?
C'est marqué Squarespace, mais ça va pas rester là, ça va être qu'un .com bientôt là. Mais check le site, man, à date, je suis rendu là.
Le poulet. Je vais checker ton website, mon petit coco.
Donc ça va être tout pour le live stream. Malheureusement, Noé, je vais chercher ma blonde dans 40 minutes. Donc on va se reprendre sûrement ce soir pour la partie de Space